You're all muted in the meantime, and just be aware of that. And we've turned off your videos as well. But if you do want to ask a question uh, orally, then feel free at the end of the webinar to also turn on your webcam and audio. Over to you, Michael, please, for the slides. So the next slide, please. So atmosphere has been around for 20 odd years now, previously known as SECO, and during COVID, rebranded as Atmosphere because we'd become quite well known for events that we were hosting around the world. And we felt that it was more appropriate given the mission that we had for the organization. We are global. We're very fiercely independent. We're not owned by any commercial interest. And we work with many different organizations in the industry, many different stakeholders, and that allows us to remain independent so that we can push the mission that we have, which is really to kind of accelerate the uptake of clean cooling and heating solutions using natural refrigerants, be that CO2, hydrocarbons, ammonia, air, or water for heating and cooling applications, mostly in the commercial and industrial segments. And we've been doing that for a good chunk of time since 2006. And you can find out more on atmosphere.cool. Michael, if you click one more time, we'll be able to highlight some of the different activities that we're known for. And we, a couple of years ago, launched an industry label called Atmo Approved that recognizes the best-in-class manufacturers and contractors working with natural refrigerants and quantifies, and that's the most important, actually quantifies their impact with natural refrigerant equipment in the market in terms of avoided CO2 equivalent emissions. And since the beginning of this year, we've also been quantifying avoided TFA emissions that are well-known PFAS. We also have a news platform called naturalrefrigerants.com that rebranded from 3 different websites previously known as r744.com, hydrocarbons 21, and ammonia 21. We merged all of those last year into a new platform called naturalrefrigerants.com, and we publish news on a daily basis. We have a marketplace where we have more and more products and partners, and we are generating qualified sales leads for those partners worldwide. And it's the reference when it comes to natural refrigerants news. We also host a variety of events. We've done, I think, 80 now, 80, since 2009 on basically every continent, bar one. I don't count Antarctica here because it's pretty hard to organize an event there, but basically all the other continents we've been there, and we'll continue to do so to bring, decision makers for sharing of best practice and accessing, useful insights from different regions of the world. Then we also publish reports. We have tailor-made reports as well as free guides that are distributed and shared with stakeholders around the world. And this is what we're going to focus on today. Next slide, please. Yep. So our team, we're headquartered in Brussels, Belgium. We have an entity in Tokyo for the APAC region. We also have an entity in North America out of New York. In Europe, we also have a team in Barcelona. And most recently, since the beginning of the year, beginning of last year, sorry, we have a team, an entity in Abu Dhabi. So we're trying to be present in a variety of different regions around the world and time zones. Next slide. We work with, I think the number is now close to 300 different industry stakeholders or partners. This is a selection of companies that you will recognize, many of the major players in the refrigeration, chiller, and heat pump segments. And just to kind of show that we work with many companies that are often competing with each other, but they respect our independence. They know that how we manage that, and we've been doing that since day one. And it's vital for us in order to play a role of an accelerator in this industry. So next slide, please. A little bit about naturalrefrigerants.com. We're the #1 publisher of news and insights And over the years, since we started nearly 20 years ago, we've published thousands, tens of thousands, I think it's well over 10,000 articles that you can find online. We've had generated millions and millions of page views, and we're read by decision makers around the world. And every day we have new people subscribing to the newsletter. Next slide. These are events that we're planning in the coming months. We just finished one a couple of weeks ago in Australia, very successful event. Next up, we're in Atlanta in 2 weeks' time for our 15th edition, I think, in the US, ATMO American Summit. Then we go to Berlin for a specific mobile air conditioning event for the second time. Then we're in Italy, Northern Italy, for the ATMO Europe event. Then we go back to, we go to Colombia for the first time, to Bogota for ATMO Latin America after being in Mexico the last couple of years. And we will be announcing, and this is a bit of an exclusive, we'll be announcing the next ATMO America Summit in Albany in June 2026. We will also be announcing later next month, we'll be announcing another event that we'll be adding to this roster of conferences in the Middle East. We'll be doing our first ATMO Middle East very soon as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is where I hand over to Michael Hines. Michael's been with us a couple of years now. Joined the team as managing editor of naturalrefrigerants.com, has a journalist background, and has, really is managing the team of in-house journalists and freelancers that we have around the world to generate great content for naturalrefrigerants.com. And we felt that it would be a natural next step for Michael and his colleagues to then do the annual report on refrigeration market trends. So Michael, this is where I mute myself and hand over to you and let you present some of the data. And then again, for the questions that people may have, we will have time at the end of the webinar. But in the meantime, you can use the chat. Thank you very much. Over to you, Michael.
Alrighty, thank you, Mark. Let me get the slides back up. First time running one of these and have to admit folks as they come in, unfortunately. So I'll try not to pause too much on that. But we're back. And as Mark said, yes, I am the managing editor of naturalrefrigerants.com. I was also the lead writer on the report. I see Sabrina out here in the audience. She was crucial in gathering the data for the report. So it's definitely a team effort. And yeah, thank all those involved. Let's dive into it. I want to be conscious of time to leave some minutes left for Q&A and also feedback. So I'll try and move quick, but not too quick. Nope. So this report, right, it's available for free. You can download it as a PDF. You can visit atmo.cool and view it as a series of web pages. And at the end of this presentation, we'll talk about some exciting new versions of the report. You're free to use the information inside of it, including the graphics and the data, but just please cite your sources, folks. Let people know where you got the information from and those awesome images. We'd really appreciate it. All right, so we're going to start high and then we'll zoom in. We'll go global first. So this is a very popular graph. Transcritical CO2 installations in major regions, stores and industrial sites. And don't worry about doing the counting because we did it for you. We're around 115,000 installations worldwide. And of those, around 25,000 are condensing units, right? So the majority of those are racks in these stores and industrial sites. And of those condensing units, you're going to find pretty much all of them, according to our research in Europe and Japan. And sorry, give me one sec, folks. We have someone else to admit. Oh, I don't know if I see him in the waiting room anymore. All right, I'll get back to it. All right, doors closed, folks. So this graph, it's interesting, right? For one reason, it shows a massive hockey stick for the growth of transcritical CO2 in Europe. And this is stores. So this is commercial refrigeration. You have this massive hockey stick growth, this 90,000 stores figure. It's also interesting because the US is kind of where North America was, or sorry, North America is where Europe was about 10 years ago. So time will tell if we see, a similar hockey stick growth pattern. We're optimistic. We're obviously facing different headwinds and maybe we were facing the last few years, but this graph or this chart. Hopefully it's something that we can show in 10 more years and have Europe, or sorry, the US take off like Europe has. Transcritical CO2 market penetration, growth in major regions. This is supermarkets, grocery stores, and convenience stores. So this is showing out of the total store counts in these regions, Europe, North America, and Japan, what's the penetration of transcritical CO2? And again, we're mostly talking racks, although when we move over to Japan, we're mostly talking condensing units there. And as you can see in Europe, we'll dive into these numbers in a few more slides for each region, but we're at 30%. So one out of almost every three stores, supermarkets, grocery stores you go into in Europe will have transcritical CO2 powering the refrigeration system. In North America, much of a different story, but we can kind of slice and dice those numbers in a different way to tell a nicer story. And in Japan, we're continuing to see some good growth, and we'll dive into what's leading that growth in a few more slides. Another world map, this one showing self-contained hydrocarbon cabinets installed around the world. And this number is big. It's 30 million. And for those who read our reports last year, I believe we had the number at around 4 million, 4.5 million. And to clarify, this is not year-over-year growth. This is a new baseline. So the 2024 figure is where we estimate the market to be at. And this new figure, it's much bigger, but it's also the result of just better information. We had people in the industry come to us. We reached out to more people and they told us, hey, your figures, you're undercounting. You need to basically, here's the information that you're missing. And it was, truth be told, kind of large. So we're here at 30 million now, and that's where we're at going forward. So those previous figures, go ahead and throw them out because this is definitely a more accurate number based on all the sources we spoke with. Low charge ammonia installations, you can see around the world, the numbers aren't the same, right? They're not as large, but still some encouraging signs. And over here on the left of the slide, we have our definition for low charge ammonia. It's below 1.3 kilograms per kilowatts or 10.1 pounds per ton of refrigeration. And now we're moving from the global, we're starting to go into the regions we covered, starting with Europe. Transcritical CO2 installations in Europe, and you can see the breakout here of those 95,000 sites with transcritical CO2. The vast majority are stores. The vast majority of those stores use racks. And we also have almost 5,000 industrial sites. I believe it's 4,900. I have the little people view covering some of my slides, but I think we're at 4,900. And one thing to note is that when it comes to stores, we're close to a 50-50 split between new stores and retrofits. So the primary way we gather data for this report is by reaching out to manufacturers of these systems and asking them, hey, as of December of 2024, how many of your CO2 racks or CO2 condensing units will be in stores in Europe? And last year we added a new data point. Are these retrofits? Are these new stores? We're continuing to refine our model all the time, but this is just some interesting information for us to know that it's new stores are driving, but also it's retrofits, right? Europe is obviously going this way due to the revised F-gas regulation, and old stores are starting to be retrofit with CO2 systems. It's not just new stores. Market penetration. So out of Europe, 300,000 total stores, about 30% of those are transcritical CO2 stores. So far and away, our leader when it comes to market penetration. And then the growth of transcritical CO2 in Europe, these are stores and industrial facilities. So once again, we did the math for you, right? From 2021 to 2022, 42% growth. That 26% figure corresponds to 2022 to 2023. And then for this year's reports, 33% growth figure. And again, this is stores and industrial facilities. Another way to look at growth with this bar chart, again, this is stores and industrial sites. This is transcritical CO2. And you can see here the growth split out between store racks, store condensing units, and industrial sites. And yeah, you can just really see the growth, kind of that hockey stick again, represented in a new way, right? Especially on the commercial side. Industrial is coming along, but that commercial side is very encouraging, as are the numbers in industrial, but it's just great to see such a shoot up. Self-contained hydrocarbon cabinets in Europe. Again, new data for this year, we're at 17 million. And something interesting to note is that it's not just, cases replacing cases. We visited, and I will butcher the pronunciation, I'm sorry, an E. Leclerc. Mark, you might be shaking your head. in France, and they replaced quite a bit of their remote CO2 cases with self-contained R290 cases from Novum. The reason being that it was just difficult in their location of France to get service for their CO2 rack. The CO2 rack is still there. It's still powering some other cases, cabinets, but they turn to these R290 cases because, hey, they're just easier to service. You pop out the cassette and put a new one in. So yeah, you're also seeing, R290 cases compete with racks, especially on smaller format stores. Interestingly enough, though, this was a hypermarket. It's quite large. I was actually there for it. Pretty impressive. All right, moving on to transcritical CO2 in industrial sites. Again, we're seeing positive growth here. The numbers kind of oscillate, right? But no matter what, you're never falling below a 20% growth rate. And the big takeaway here is that we're seeing larger capacities into the multiple megawatts for these CO2 systems. Low charge ammonia, once again, we're seeing positive growth. We had 16, 17, a slight dip this past year for this report, but still, we're edging closer to 4,000 systems. Would not be shocked to see that number next year. All right, moving on to North America. So North America, as we define it, as you can see with the shading, is the US and Canada. And between the two, we're at just about 5,000 sites. Canada leads in industrial sites, but the US leads in stores. And when we're talking market penetration, here's where I talked about maybe spinning that figure in a little bit better of a way. So you have a 1.8% market penetration when you talk supermarkets, grocery stores, and convenience stores. But if you were to set aside those convenience stores, you'd have a 5.8% transcritical CO2 market penetration for grocery stores and supermarkets, right? So that 5.8% figure, it's from just supermarkets and grocery stores. Looks a lot shinier than 1.8%. And when we're thinking transcritical CO2 in commercial refrigeration, it's, massive companies like Aldi kind of moving the needle there. Aldi is a great example to me because it's just a holistic plan to use naturals across their whole range of stores, across different regions. And as you can see here, they're up to 75 transcritical CO2 stores in North America. That was from November 15th. So by November 2025, probably expect that to be 850. It would probably just go with their expansion in the region. When you look at growth, again, we've done the math for you. The top set of figures is for the US and Canada. In the bottom, we've broken them out by country. But when we're talking growth, you're looking at, that next batch of companies who will be adopting naturals next in the commercial sector. And this is really exciting. At Atmo America 2024, we had Kroger on stage, and they announced, I think before anywhere else, but we had it first, I'm pretty sure, that they will use CO2 refrigeration in new stores. And Kroger is huge. They have 1,200 stores across the country, something like that. These are new stores, but if the strategy expands to retrofits and remodels, that's a major impact. Their merger with Albertsons was scuttled, but if that ever happens, could be, that would be an incredibly large chain. And if one half of that chain is committed to naturals, who knows where the other half might go. So this definitely is worth watching what will happen with Kroger in the future. So transcritical CO2 installation growth, stores and industrial sites. You can see here, this looks a bit more like that hockey stick we're looking for, right? With stores leading the way, industrial sites starting to tick up a bit, but that store growth, it's looking good when you break it down like this. Or sorry, presented in this way. Oh. Right, self-contained hydrocarbon cabinets between the US and Canada, we're at 4.6 million. And when we were digging into this data, we saw that, hey, it's natural refrigerants, it's good for regulations, it's good for the environment, but also it's just good for energy efficiency. If you go on the Energy Star sites, Energy Star may not be long for this world. Hopefully it stays. You'll see that 90% of the Energy Star certified commercial freezers and refrigerators, they use isobutane or propane. So now when you just go to select a energy efficient case for your supermarket, your choices are pretty much just naturals, which is great news for us. And it's, sort of a sneaky way in there. It's not necessarily playing on that natural refrigerants, GWP, TFA, PFAS angle. It's just, hey, if you don't even care about that, this is energy efficiency. You probably care about that. Growth of transcritical CO2 in North America, when we're talking industrial sites, the big takeaway here, increased competition with ammonia. You'll see from this story down here, Evapco acquired LMP a few years back. LMP CO2 racks, they're seeing a big trend in demand for industrial CO2 systems in North America. So, maybe the numbers aren't quite where the commercial numbers are, but it seems like that demand is building and will definitely sort of be unleashed and more visible in the next few years. But, manufacturers are seeing it and they're telling us this. I believe actually Mark visited LMP and shot this video. That's where it's from. So yeah, he can attest to what's coming next. Low charge ammonia, we have the breakdown here between packaged and central systems between the US and Canada. One thing to note is that the numbers for packaged systems, well, they're not nearly as high as for the central systems, but the growth rate is different. So packaged, I believe it was a 38% year-over-year increase compared to centralized systems, which is 15%. It's just one data point, it's 1 year, but it kind of gives a bit more context to maybe where things are going with low charge ammonia in the US. So again, we're at about 1,200 sites here between the two countries. And here you can see the growth rates year over year ticking up in the last few years, which great, we love to see that. Low charge ammonia in the US. Moving on to Latin America. This is actually one of two new regions in the report for this year. Close readers of our reports will note that the previous edition was looking into Europe, North America, and Japan. We decided to take a look at Latin America this year, and well, we call it a snapshot because we're just sort of figuring out what the market looks like. As we define it, it's 20 countries set into three subregions, Mexico, Central, and South America. So it's a lot of ground to cover, but our kind of first pass at it, we found 680 sites with transcritical CO2. 580 of those are stores, but we do have some industrial sites. The region is definitely watching Europe, both in terms of just where manufacturers are going, but also regulations. So market penetration, we broke this out by countries once we got the data, and it was pretty interesting because Ecuador, you might not think of that as a haven for natural refrigerants. There's a 13% market penetration in commercial food retail for CO2, which is incredible, transcritical CO2. Argentina and Colombia, it's a bit lower, but there's a lot more stores to account for. And with Ecuador and Colombia specifically, in our research and our conversations, it's just a good climate for CO2. It's never very hot in the major cities year round. These systems are just being looked at not as, hey, is there a CO2 equator, so to speak, but they just make sense for where we're at. That conversation is happening other places, maybe, shouldn't be, but not there. And then you can see over here from Atmo LATAM 2025 in Mexico City, just, yeah, there are some government incentives and pilot projects to really boost naturals in Colombia and Ecuador specifically. Hydrocarbon cabinets in Latin America. We have this broken out by Mexico, Central and South America. It's just how we got the data. And one thing interesting here is that you have a lot of domestic manufacturing, right? So you have Embraco, they have a compressor plant in Brazil. It's making R290 isobutane compressors for commercial cases and freezers. You have Weston in Colombia. They started making R290 cases in 2021. I don't even know if I should try to pronounce this name because I'm going to butcher it. Electrofrio Refrigerant. Oh, Mark, thank you for the encouragement. They offer R290 cases as well. So it seems like a similar story with, North America. Hey, we have just high energy efficiency. We have a lot of domestic manufacturing. So these numbers are high because we didn't expect to see this in this region. We didn't expect these numbers, frankly, from what we saw from our past report. But once you dive into it, it makes a lot more sense. These products are just readily available and they're energy efficient. Low charge ammonia systems, this is where the snapshot term really does some heavy lifting. Transcritical CO2 as well. We're talking industrial here. And again, this is our first pass at this, but you see some encouraging numbers by region, right? 50 transcritical CO2 industrial sites in South America. That's nice. You have a good amount of low charge ammonia in Mexico. We're at 160 total sites, industrial sites, sorry. And we expect that figure to rise as we do the report this year for 2025. But this is our first take on it. Right, moving on to our second new region, we have Australia and New Zealand. And transcritical CO2 installations in Australia and New Zealand, we're at 650 between the two countries, with New Zealand leading the way with industrial sites and Australia leading the way with stores. And in Australia, also in New Zealand, but the point's better illustrated in Australia, like in the US, you're seeing big chains drive the adoption of transcritical CO2 in commercial food retail. So this article is actually from April 2024, and it's Woolworth's 100th transcritical CO2 store in Australia. They've since opened many more transcritical stores. And you see the same story similarly in New Zealand. You have the large grocery chains, I think there's three of them, and a bunch of independents. The large chains are pretty much moving, if they haven't already, entirely to naturals for new stores and also retrofitting older stores. So what that leads to in terms of market penetration, over in New Zealand, you have a 22% penetration rate for transcritical CO2 in commercial food retail. The store count is obviously higher over in Australia, but still 7.7% penetration rate. It's really good. And again, these figures are the result of these, big players, Coles and Woolworths in Australia, for example, Aldi as well. With their commitment to naturals, they can really drive numbers like this. The independents as well are moving there. We had an independent grocer at Atmo Australia 2025 talking about their experience with transcritical CO2. Ritchie's, an integrated system. So it's definitely not just these bigger companies, but they are the ones who can, make a decision and have a couple hundred stores follow suit. Right. And the industrial side for transcritical CO2 and low charge ammonia, unfortunately, we weren't able to gather data on low charge ammonia for New Zealand. And the baseline we have for this first year of reporting on the region is 140 industrial sites between transcritical CO2 and low charge ammonia. For those of you who follow Australia, you'll know that probably a lot of those low charge ammonia sites had Stefan Jensen's fingerprints on them. He's a big booster of them. He also spoke at Atmo Australia 2025. We had MB Group speak, and they were on the CO2 side and talked about a variety of industrial installations they've done, projects with CO2, period. So there are people, in the absence of regulation, there are a lot of just companies working on this period. It's happening, maybe under our noses, so to speak. Going to Japan, not a new region for this year of the report, but an important one regardless, because they have quite a few sites with transcritical CO2 systems, the majority of which are convenience stores, but supermarkets also getting closer to that 1,000 mark. We have 470 industrial sites. It's worth noting that the majority, probably all of these, are CO2 condensing units, and the convenience stores are, pretty much all condensing units. It's hard for me to imagine a rack in there. But you have just a lot of uptake from these convenience store chains, right? This is a recent article from January detailing just the number of stores that use CO2 by major chains. And you can see it reflected in the market penetration figures here, right? So 16% market penetration for all food retail stores. But when you break that down to just convenience stores, you get 20% market penetration. When you go to supermarkets, these larger format stores, the number falls off, but it's still maybe early days for supermarkets there, we'll say. And it's encouraging numbers regardless of 3.5%. So this graph, or this chart on the left, for those who don't read Japanese, it's okay. It shows the ascension of CO2 in industrial refrigeration. It also shows the patterns for ammonia CO2 cascade. That's the orange line up top. And just straight ammonia systems. This graph comes from the Japan Association of Refrigerated Warehouses. They represent, I believe, around 50% of the cold storage warehouses in Japan, their membership. And each year they do a refrigerant survey. And this is the results of their most recent survey from 2024. So what you can see here is that CO2, it's ticking up, right? It's not anywhere near where that ammonia CO2 cascade figures at, but it's been making positive growth every year since, what is that, 2018, 2017, whereas ammonia CO2 cascade is kind of going up and down, and then just ammonia systems by themselves are falling down and leveling off. And then you have, it might be HCFCs on the bottom. My Japanese is a bit rusty, but yeah, in terms of the naturals, you see CO2 just making more of an entry, making more of an impact. And on the right, you can see the bar chart showing the growth, stores and industrial, right, for transcritical CO2. Folks, we have made it through our tour of all the regions, and now you get some exciting news, and that is that our report, which you can find on atmosphere.cool, is available in Spanish, and it's also available in audio format. So if you go to atmosphere.cool, you will see reports. The interactive report is what you're looking for. That's what you can click around, right? That's the web pages. On each of those pages, there's a button on the bottom of the page with little flags. You can go from English to Spanish. Every page of the report is translated. And if you're on the go, you can also check us out on Spotify. We have every chapter of the report in audio format. This audio is read by AI, so there might be some interesting pronunciation choices, but it's all there. So if you don't have time to read, if you're doing something with your hands, whatever it is, you can give us a listen. And again, that's on Spotify. It's also on the pages themselves. So if you navigate there, you'll find both the translations and the audio. And we'll have an announcement coming out about this shortly, but we wanted to share it with y'all first because you stopped by the webinar and we really appreciate you. Otherwise, open for Q&A and feedback. I'm checking the time and I definitely zoomed through this presentation. So yeah, if you'd like me to go back to some slides, go back to some points, let me know. On the feedback front, I'm especially interested in knowing what you'd like to see in the 2025 report. Anything new? Would you like us to go deeper into, existing data points? What are you looking for? What would make this report more useful for you, more exciting to read? We're open for suggestions, so please let us know. Mark, are you able to unmute? Okay. Stop the share.
Okay, so thank you, Michael, for that presentation. Couple of points. I see there are a couple of questions, and I'm letting people take the time to maybe raise additional questions if they wish. And I think we want to make sure that this content gets out to as many people as possible. So we're really happy now that we've got basically a website now. We've converted this report, this PDF that you can download for free into a website where you can just navigate from page section to section on your iPad or iPhone or Android phone whenever you're out and about. It just makes it easier to get access to that content. And as Michael said, we've got it translated into Spanish. And we're going to test that, and then we're also going to bring it to additional languages later this summer. We're thinking of French as being another one, and a couple of other languages in addition, possibly Japanese and Mandarin, even Arabic. So if you have any ideas or you think that could be useful, we'd be happy to listen to that input as well. In addition, and I think this is the really cool thing, I'm guessing a lot of us listen to podcasts more and more when we're out and about and traveling. And we're really happy to test this out and actually bring this report into basically an audiobook. Each chapter is converted into audio. Michael has gone through each chapter, made sure that the content is properly pronounced and edited properly. So it does require work from our end, but it allows you to listen to the content in a very user-friendly way, and we'll bring that out to Spotify and other podcasting platforms in the coming weeks. And we will do that also in additional languages, starting with Spanish. So hopefully that allows to share that content to a wider audience going forward. So that's just to kind of give you kind of like a snippet as to what we're thinking of with regard to this free report. Now, I see there's a couple of questions. So I'm assuming, Michael, you've seen them, but I'll start off with Jacopo Bettio from Corel, I believe. He's asking data about self-contained hydrocarbon cabinets in Europe. He's assuming that only refers to food retail. What can you say on that in turn, Michael, please?
Yeah, it's only food retail, so supermarkets and grocery stores. I can unmute as well if there's any follow-up. Me.
Yeah, okay. If Jacopo's still online, he feel free to comment if you wish.
No, thank you. I just wanted to know if those 17 millions of cabinets is the actual baseline of installed cabinets in food retail, or only a general number of self-contained hydrocarbon cabinets, but also in HoReCa and other environments, let's say, or applications.
Yeah, so it's the baseline figure of cabinets cases installed in just food retail. So what's out there in the wild, so to speak. So if you were to visit a grocery store, it's not I figured it doesn't account for anything else. I missed the back half of your question, but I think my answer
I
addresses it.
think Jacopo was referring to other segments like Oreca and other types of industries
Yeah, it's
beyond food
only,
retail. I
yeah.
think that number, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, continue, Mark.
I believe that Jacopo, that does include other industries. This is where I have to stand down and let Michael handle this because he's the one that was doing the data collection. So Michael, if you disagree, let me know. Um,
Yeah,
but what
we
the way
ask
you
for commercial food retail and
yeah.
specify what we're looking for when we talk to manufacturers. That's the main way of gathering data for the report is going to the manufacturers. We keep everything anonymous so that they can share freely. But yeah, we're not accounting for other sort of applications for these cases. Future reports, that's something we might do, not necessarily for cases, but just in general, drill down and get a bit more granular. So for industrial applications, what kind of industrial sites are we talking about? But for cases, it's only ever been accounting for food retail.
Okay, I think what Jacopo is probably going to ask is that probably a big number that, and I think when we collect that data, and this is the lesson for us, is that we need to be as more specific as possible as we start to get more granular with the data collection going forward to eliminate some segments or sub-segments to make sure that there's no confusion from the person actually answering the questionnaire or giving us input to make sure that we're not giving the wrong numbers. So that's something that we can is work in progress. And as Michael said already, the baseline has improved tremendously this year versus last year, and that's simply because we've been reaching out to more people within the industry, and talking to more people and getting and cross-checking that data, not just getting it from one source, just to be very clear. So multiple different sources and just cross-checking it and then building it into our model with our own assumptions that we've been building over the last few years. And that was partly also done by a former colleague. I saw Alana was on the call here. So she was very much involved in helping build that model out a few years ago. And we've been refining that over the years. So, yeah, hopefully that answers you, Jacopo. I guess that's a yes. So then we got another question. Okay, Jacopo said yes. And then a second question is from Vladimir Trandafilov. I am sorry for pronouncing it badly, your surname. Apologies for that. The question is, do you think ammonia could lose out to CO2? Ooh, what do you think, Michael?
Uh, wow, big question. I would say that I think of it kind of through the lens of these delivery companies, e-commerce companies. So basically, if you're trying to build distribution centers, storage centers, whatever, closer to where people live, you're going to look for CO2, right? You're going to try and maybe lower your risk. In that regard, if they keep building, you might see just a larger uptick. Whether these facilities are as large and can serve, sort of the same needs as ammonia remains to be seen. I don't know. You will probably always have, use cases for ammonia with thousands of pounds of charge, tens of thousands, that transcritical CO2 may not be able to match. But if you're looking for something smaller and more nimbler, closer to a population center, transcritical CO2, I could see eating ammonia's lunch there, especially maybe places that are heavily populated, somewhere like Japan, for example, or densely populated. But yeah, it's interesting because ammonia, I think when people think industrial, especially in the US at least, is still the refrigerant of choice. And transcritical CO2 is on the radar, but I think you're still fighting maybe headwinds from folks in the industry who just it's ammonia or nothing else. And how do we build around it versus what else can we consider? What about you, Mark?
Yeah, my 2 cents on it is when I in conversations that I have with people. I mean, generally, I do think CO2. There is more and more direct competition between CO2 and ammonia in commercial and light industrial, and for different reasons. Each end user has their own drivers, um, whether that's efficiency or just safety or regulations or cost or service or a variety of those things. They choose, but there is generally in the conversation I see is that there is a eating of the market by CO2. So that's just a general trend. But again, naturals are eating the market of synthetics. So the pie is getting bigger overall. And in different regions. So, there's still a lot of future for ammonia, especially with all the low charge systems that are coming to market in different regions in different ways. So I I think the future is bright for both. And, ammonia has a lot of future in other applications too. Heat pumps, larger heat pumps, and even in HVAC solutions if regulations evolve. There's a lot of potential there too. So and why not data centers? So there's a lot of potential. But anyway, hopefully that answers your question, Vladimir. I see a question from Sander from Dutech. Hello, Sander. Hope you're well. Is it possible to investigate other sectors in the future, like residential building, utility buildings, transport, industry, greenhouses, district heating? In an ideal world, yes, we'd have an annual report for all of these segments. That is a free report. We're doing refrigeration. We'll continue to do that. We're going to be introducing a new annual report for data centers that we'll be announcing next week, I believe. So that's a segment that we want to give focus on as well, because we see a lot of interest in that area for data centers with natural refrigerants. And heat pumps, residential, commercial, industrial is also another area. And yes, we are thinking of launching an annual report on that as well, Sander. But we have limited resources. So if we get a lot more feedback saying, please do this faster rather than later, then we will pay attention to that. But yes, it's a definite interest to us. So I guess that's also a comment from Stephen, I see. Hello, Stephen. I hope you're well too. It's been a while. And yeah, I guess Stephen wants this as well. I'm guessing why. I know why with AO Smith. And great that you've got some CO2 heat pumps in the US. Finally. So great to see that AO Smith are moving on that. So well done, Stephen. Yeah, so we'll pay attention to all this. Okay, thank you for the comment, Vladimir. And then we have Dimitrios. Hello, Dimitrios from Greece. Great to have you there. Sorry if you already covered this, but do you have any news when it would expect the new EN378 that will be more precise in R290 heat pump installations? At the moment, it's really general and maybe dangerous if not installed correct. I personally don't have any input on that. Do you, Michael?
I don't at the moment.
Okay, Dimitrios, sorry. We can talk internally and get back to you on that. We'll take note on the question, okay, and then we'll revert. I know that we have some info, but I personally didn't follow that closely enough. Okay. All right. Do we have any more questions?
Mark, I just wanted to add with the
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
That getting into new sectors, something we're always interested in doing. Data centers, we're moving out of commercial refrigeration, we're going there. One thing, and this goes back to the feedback, I'm glad for what we have. If anyone else has any more, let us know what you'd like to see. Because, for example, we have the existing data we have, but we can drill down into it in more specific ways. So we can make the existing reports, more impactful. They can have more information, So if there's anything you'd like to see there based on refrigeration that you don't see now, please let us know outside of different sectors. What more would you like to know about, commercial and industrial refrigeration with naturals? You can let us know here. You can send us an email. You can send me an email. I'm the one who's been sending out the event reminders, but we're on the hunt for feedback because we've heard some good stuff so far.
Yeah, and what for the refrigeration report, just on that. We will be adding another region in 2020 for the 2026 edition. That will be South Africa. Because we've got comments about that as well, so that we can truly go as global as possible. For other places like the Middle East, the numbers are a handful to basically summarize, so that they're negligible. But in South Africa, there is a lot of momentum with CO2 in particular. So we'll cover that. China, that is a difficult one. There was a lot of momentum years ago, and it kind of like petered out. Our colleagues were in China Ref just last month, talking to a lot of Chinese players. It's kind of our feeling is that CO2 isn't really taking off in China, to be honest. Southeast Asia is a different matter. Um, but yeah, we've been told that it would be good to cover also, say, Southeast Asian regions like, say, Thailand, um, Singapore, Malaysia, possibly even Indonesia. Um, we were personally involved in a project for CO2 and ammonia systems and hydrocarbons on behalf of the UN in the Philippines for the last 4 years. We managed a UN funded project there to bring natural refrigerants to the food chain. So we help deliver that, and we can send you information about that if you're interested. If you got particular attention focus on Philippines. But yeah, these numbers are still very small in comparison. So probably they would come best case in the 2027 report, the one coming out in January 2027. For 2026, we'll stick with the countries we have now, plus we'll add South Africa, and then we'll try and go a little bit more granular. Did you want to add anything there, Michael?
Yeah, just with regard to the numbers, and even regionally, if we don't cover this area on the report, reach out to me via email, and let me know if there's something we should
Yeah,
look into. Because if anything, we could write a story, we could get this region on our radar. And if you've seen these numbers and you think, hey, they're overcounted, they're undercounted, also reach out to us because that's a really big tool. This is very much people driven, this report. There's desk research that goes into it, but it's a lot of emails and phone calls and just chatting with folks who know the
yeah,
numbers. And if you know
yeah,
them and you want to inform us one way or the other, we'd really appreciate it. We're always looking for feedback on that front too.
absolutely. Yeah, it's always work in progress. Each year we can do better. But hopefully this is a useful tool for you and it helps you get a sense of where the market's heading with regard to in regard to refrigeration, where CO2 and propane are doing, massive job. So it's exciting to see and we will play our role in that. All right. I think we'll call it a day. Thanks for your questions and comments. We'll send you the presentation to all the people that participated on this webinar. We'll also share the video on LinkedIn for people that wish. We'll add it to YouTube and share it for people to view as well later on. And yeah, thank you very much for your support and see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you, folks. Have a good rest of your day.